Appreciate you. Next session is self-talk. Is the most powerful tool for creating our destiny. That's by Jeff Powers. He has a BA in psychology and education, MS in counseling and guidance, and MA in family relations and adolescent development from West Virginia University. He has developed and employed counseling, coaching, and training techniques in working with individuals and corporations. He utilizes diverse methods of personal self-inquiry to add value to the process, as well as emotional fulfillment and spiritual direction. His workshops give people a tool to effectively manage their personal and professional lives and enrich their relationships. He's a psychotherapist, spiritual advisor, and teaches meditative techniques. Let us welcome Jack Powers.
Thank you very, very much. In your packets, there is a one sheet. You may want to pull that out because I am going to reference something on it near the beginning of my talk. Actually, these are my notes, but I like to share my notes. I find that other people benefit, not just myself. If I do my job right, by the end of this presentation, you should have many more questions on this topic than you have right now. Many more. And your part, if you should choose to accept it, is to think about your self-talk and become more aware of what you're saying to yourself moment by moment and be willing to work with your self-talk. I want to use some sacred, this is for me something that is very important to connect with my higher self and with the Father. And so I need to go through just a little, if you will, spiritual moment. And it's kind of a way of my connecting and praising the Father. On your handout, there's an expression that I have found to be very useful as part of my self-talk. It's a sacred expression, the Eya, Asher, Eya. And this is very, very different. Earlier, you heard from some of the presenters about I am. Eya, Asher, Eya is very different in its concept. It is I am that I am. I shall be that I shall be. In fact, on the handout, you will see, it represents the presence of the Father uniquely unfolding within and before us. It's the highest expression that we can give to ourselves to bring forth all of our life factors into the next threshold of existence. And so the I am that I am, the I shall be that I shall be, is a way of reminding me, or us, to stay in contact with our higher self, to be in a sense of continually unfolding and evolving. And it's not just for us. It's I am that I will be, that I shall be, so that I can go forth and do what is mine to do, connecting us with our purpose for being here. These are the goals. We have 3. Can you see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. I want to define self-talk. And interestingly, I made myself a note. I was doing some meditation the other day, and this thought came to me that I ought to share with you. And that is that the average person takes more care with how they talk to significant others than with what they are saying to themselves. Especially like in the workplace, or if you're a parent with children, or with a spouse or a good friend, we tend to focus more on what we say to others than in paying attention to what we're saying to ourselves. Yet, what we say to ourselves has far more reaching influence on us, on others, and on the world. And so if we don't take the effort, take the time to become more aware of what's going on with our self-talk, we are severely limiting ourselves in life and in our ability to connect with others. So I want to define self-talk, and I'm going to give you the brief definition, because we could spend the next 45 minutes just on the definition. It's all the things that are going through our mind, conscious and unconscious. Yes, it's what we say to ourselves, what we think and believe to be true about ourselves, about significant others, about our life circumstances. It's the pictures that we create in our mind's eye. It's everybody does scenario abstracts. A scenario abstract is when you are thinking about what's going to happen. Maybe like when you go to work, or when you talk to your spouse, or you talk to a child about an issue, and you do a little role play. Some people use the word a little role play, or it's an expectation of what you think will happen. Scenario abstracts we are creating very, very often. Sometimes they just present. Sometimes we don't create the scenario abstract consciously. It just pops up, and we believe that that's what will be. It's the choices that we recognize. That's part of our self-talk. When we look at something and we think, well, I could do this, those choices that we see, that we recognize, are part of our self-talk. It's mantras. Mantras, I'm using a very generic sense here. We all have mantras. It's things that we repeatedly believe and say and think about in certain kinds of situations. And so it's kind of our position, our mantra. Repeated prayers. Remembrances. Almost everyone has remembrances from earlier in their life, and those will tend to replay. Sometimes we just let them replay, and we don't work with them to modify them, to upgrade them to where we are today. When I say ingrained feelings, often we have feelings about things that, well, they're just sort of there. It comes along with when we go to visit Uncle Joe, or when we're in this particular place. And so as we move through life and we meet people and we go through different situations, feelings repeatedly come up. I call them ingrained feelings. And this is big, expected outcomes. Many expected outcomes get implanted or imprinted in us from when we were young. Things that parents might have expected and imposed upon us, meaning well, but depending on how we absorbed it, because they as parents were coming from one place, and we as a child did not have the intellectual development, and so we obviously interpreted it, perceived it in a very different way. Or expectations that a boss or a significant other has. Or it might be ones that we ourselves have. When I do marriage counseling, one of the issues I see frequently is that people unintentionally became married to their expectations of how their spouse ought to be, and it resides in the unconscious mind, and now they have this real live, breathing human being, and uh-oh, they don't match up with those unconscious expectations that we gathered when we were kids, when we were teenagers, young adults, things that we came to believe from a movie, from a book, whatever, and all of a sudden there's this discrepancy between those unconscious expected outcomes and the reality that's in front of us. Now, This is the brief. When I say self-talk, this is what I'm referring to. So it's way more than just language. It's images, it's beliefs, it's values, it's all of this. Because of the limited amount of time, I wanted to give you the brief definition of self-talk. These are some things to think about, food for thought, to ponder. I have found, and a lot of this comes from my having been a therapist, executive coach, that kind of stuff, for a while. Next year will be 40 years, I'm only 39 years. I have found in working with thousands and thousands and thousands of people that these seem to be truths. Not for everyone, that's why I say they seem to be truths most of the time. Something for us to consider as we move into looking at this topic. Am I truly aware of my thoughts? Most people aren't. Most people do not take the time, they don't make an investment to think about and reflect upon what they think about. They don't take the time to stop and examine it in the light of day and see, does it still apply? Because some of our thoughts were created in a different time, under different circumstances, when our understandings of life and the world were different than they are today. And if we don't take time to evaluate, and we just keep replaying, it becomes an old tape that may not serve us today, and it may not be accurate. You want to choose your thoughts, not all the time. This is not a black and white kind of a thing, but we benefit when we learn to choose our thoughts more carefully, because you are the masterpiece of your life. One of the things that, this is just a thing that came to me many, many years ago. I share it with you. If it's of value, use it. If not, don't. But for me, I am the potter and the clay. And as I mold and develop me in a holistic way, physically, mentally, emotionally, yes, with my self-talk, as I mold me and life circumstances change, sometimes I shift and decide to mold me in a different way. It's a dynamic process. It's not like I begin to create me and just keep going the same way. And I know all of you have experienced this. As you achieve certain things, as you accomplish certain things in life, all of a sudden, your focus gets altered. And now, maybe I want to make a slightly different change than I was thinking about 2 years ago. And so this is kind of that inner-outer. As I gather input and information from the outer, I shift the inner dialogue. So being the potter and the clay is a dynamic process that allows me to have an element. None of us has full control. As other speakers have mentioned, we've had so many different kinds of inputs from parents, from society, from school, from so many different places. But we do have a free will. And by golly, we can use that free will and we can learn to take a fair amount of control over who we are becoming. Sometimes I call it being the music of life, to be willing to step into that space, the space between being who I've been and making choices and decisions and taking actions to become the person that I really most want to be. And if you're willing to stand in that space, which sometimes feels a little tenuous because you're not always sure, but it feels good. It can be very exciting because you are, by your choices, most especially on what you think about and what you do, you are playing a significant role in who you're becoming and what you'll be able to accomplish in this life. which then you can utilize as you go on to the next life. I like this quote. A man or a woman, a man is but the product of his totality of thoughts, of his thoughts. What he thinks he becomes. Gandhi. The industrialist, Henry Ford, said, if you believe you can, or if you believe you can't, you're right. By your repeated thoughts, you create your inner reality. And your inner reality guides you. It guides you in your decisions. It guides you in your actions. It's critical. You sculpt your future self with your thoughts, images, beliefs, and expected outcomes. Yes, circumstances play a role. Of course they do. But you can have, if you will, the final say-so in the process. The person who we, and I'm going to explain this is a complicated one. You, the person who we are meant to become, is virtually unrecognizable to the person who we are today. When I have something in quotes, that's a reminder. That's something I wrote, but I want to remember to tell you about what Thoreau said. Thoreau said a couple of things. One, he said, was that most human beings go to their graves with their music still inside them. He also said, an unexamined life is not really worth living. And so to get the music, to get the fullness of who you are meant to be, well, that's a good one. It has to do with the spiritual realm. It has to do with our purpose or purposes for being here. It has to do with the gifts we've been given, the talents. Often those gifts and talents are disguised. And I'll tell you, in my working with so many people, and myself too, I came to realize that often our gifts are disguised as challenges or as things that we might see as problems. I was born legally blind. My best corrected visual acuity was less than 2200. That's corrected. I've had surgeries, and even today, my best corrected is about 2070. You know what? I put myself through college and 3 graduate degrees as a photojournalist. And I became an award-winning photographer and was what's called a stringer. God gave that to me. Praise to the Father. Because in my having to learn to work with my situation, I forgot to shut off learning. I kept learning and learning and learning to use what I had. And it led me into photography, and it opened up. I didn't know that what others perceived as a disability, and I came to believe that to some degree, lo and behold, was not. And so, again, I'll say to you, in this life, often what we think of as a limit or something that's not so good, often is, for us, a present in disguise. Be not fooled. But if you don't reflect on your life, if you don't take the time to examine and question and analyze, and you have to do that with others, not just on your own. In workshops is a wonderful way. Reading, in groups, a life coach, a counselor. If you don't examine, you may stay with the limiting belief and never uncover the gift. Self-talk is so powerful, but that's why I put it to Thoreau. So I remember to mention his, an unexamined life is barely worth living. Most of us are consciously asleep to some degree. We have no more than 60 seed knowledge, an inkling, just a little, a seed knowledge is just, well, it's a seed. It's a seed of knowledge, it's undeveloped. It hasn't been explored. It's not bearing fruit. In fact, we don't even know exactly what it looks like. We just have sort of a little feeling about it. But most of us have no more than seed knowledge of what we're capable of. And if you don't examine self-talk and the beliefs and the expectations and the scenario abstracts, etc., it will stay seed knowledge. Are you aware that you have enormous control, not total, you have enormous control over your own future by what you do with your biocomputer, your living mind? Even for those of us who are spiritual and know this, we often forget the immense power that we have over our destiny. It's easy to forget because we live in such a fast-paced world, and often we believe we don't really have the time to examine things as much as we would like. And what I would say to you is, there's nothing that I can think of that's more important than to take the time to debrief, to examine, self-examine, to reflect upon what you're thinking. Because as you do that, it will change you and your outcomes, not just for you, but for everyone that you touch, for every realm that you step into. You are bringing a more expanded sense of what you're about and what other people are about. It is the choices we make and how we interact with others that determines our future. Frankl is another key for me. When I was in high school, I was required to read a book by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. And I took away something from it that I've utilized over and over. Viktor Frankl was a prisoner in the Holocaust, in the Nazi concentration camps. And there are two things that he came away with that I know touched him, but they really touched me big time. He said, regardless of our life circumstances, we have the two ultimate human freedoms. Number one, we can choose how we hold something in our mind's eye. We can choose how we think about something. It's not the event, it's not the circumstance, it's not the person that has the direct impact on us. Rather, it's how we choose to think about that. And freedom number two is how do we choose to manage or deal with whatever that circumstance or event or happening or person is. And even in facing death, we can choose how we're going to think about that and what actions we're going to take. Powerful. So it's the choices we make and how we interact with others that determines our future. Oh, I've learned in working with people that logic of some sort is always working, even when it may look like it's crazy behavior to us or it's irrational. There's a logic that's driving it. We just don't see it at the moment. But there's patterns that exist, whether we're aware of them or not. These habits of response are autopilot reactions born of years of programming. Are you willing to look at your programming? Are you willing to see, is it still relevant today? Is it complete? Are there pieces that are missing? Does it need to be changed? We've repeated patterns so many times. However, what we have practiced and incorporated may not serve us. And people who do not reflect and just go forward with the way they are, their current operating system, almost always, I say likely, are severely limiting themselves. I don't like to limit me. And it pains me when I see other people because I see the God, I see the good in people. And when I see someone who has such potential but is limiting themselves, it causes me a little bit of pain. I let go of that quickly because that's theirs. And I've learned that sometimes it is good for people to be in that pain. Someone brought up a question earlier. I'm going to just make a quick comment. Someone said something about how do you interact with or how do you deal when somebody's caught up in religiosity? Actually, people get caught up in all kinds of things. It could be religiosity, it could be caught up in materialistic, it could be caught up in a particular lifestyle, it could be caught up in politics. People get caught up in all kinds of things. My response would be, notice. Yes, notice when somebody is caught up, I don't care, religiosity. I'm going to notice it, but without judgment and without any feelings. Why am I going to notice it? Because that's where they're at. And if I want to have a successful, a peaceful interaction with them, and I'm not aware of my audience that I'm talking to, I'm liable to do something that would offend. And so I'm going to notice where they are. I'm going to be aware of it, but without judgment. And I'm also going to recognize, perhaps, for them, in their journey right now, that's the best place for them to be. They need to be in that place that, to me, it looks like they're caught. Maybe that's where they need to be in order to learn critical and important lessons. I haven't the right to place judgment on it. But to notice it, I absolutely want to do so I don't step into a pothole in terms of a conversation with them or how to interact. Okay. Recognize and evaluate your patterns. Be willing to replace any patterns or perceptions that are limiting your growth, which, if we haven't done a lot of reflecting, is going to be most of them, because a lot of it came from earlier in life and other people's whatevers, beliefs, values, expectations. How we are is not necessarily who we are. How we are is a matter of culture. It's a matter of upbringing. If I was born in France, I'd be speaking French now. So how we are is not necessarily who we are. We just believe, most people believe that how they are is also who they are. But not so. And again, when you see those parens, that's my reminder to share with you. One of the things that helped me to work with me and with other people was to grasp the concept of water and what kind of vessel or container it's in. Now again, this is my own personal thing. I want to share it with you because it may be of value to you, just like the potter and the clay example may hold some value for you. I came to realize water could be in a plastic bottle. It could be in a glass. It could be in my fish tank. It could be in a water fountain. It could be in a stream. The water is the water. The molecular structure of the water is still the same, H2O. However, the container that it's in gives it a somewhat perhaps different use or purpose. It may look different to me, but the pure essence of the water is still water. And in a sense, when we were talking earlier about, pure self or the core self stays reasonably constant, reasonably. How we are is much more amenable to being changed. But interestingly, as we change how we are, it does impact who we are, because who we are can be developed. It just doesn't change quite as quickly or quite as much as how we are. But that's an interesting, for me, the water in the container expresses that whole concept and a whole bunch more very easily. So I share that with you. Again, if it works for you, if it has some value, please use it. Who we are is at a deep level, often undiscovered and often underdeveloped. How we are, patterns of thought behavior, is created from many influences. When we change how we are, we modify who we are, and therefore our life outcomes, because everything emanates from who we are. Our thoughts, our decisions, our words, our behaviors are extensions of who we believe ourselves to be. Our inner dialogue has awesome power in determining who we become. I could give you so many examples, and I better not give you too many. I'm getting closer. But that's why we have things like sports psychology, where people vision things that helps them to determine and become who they want to be. Our tomorrows are shaped by our self-talk and our decisions today. There's probably no more important skill for determining our tomorrows than our self-talk. We can borrow, this is beautiful, it's a blessing. We can borrow from our ideal version of ourselves before it's manifested. We can think into, how would I be if I were at my full potential? And what little baby step could I take today that begins to move me in the direction of being that person or creating that person? I'm not fully there, but I can fake it till I make it. Visualize how the person you really want to be would handle today's demands and do your best to be like that person. With practice, you will become that person. Begin the process of raising your self-esteem, that's kind of how we feel about ourselves, by identifying beliefs that may be preventing you from feeling good about yourself. Wonderful book, What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. What to Say When You Talk to Yourself by Shad, S-H-A-D, Helmstetter, H-E-L-M-S-T-E-T-T-E-R. Explore yourself. Explore where your beliefs originated, if you need to. Sometimes we do. Challenge your beliefs. Clean house where those beliefs no longer serve. List your positive qualities. Review and grow the list, and enlist the help of others if necessary. And be grateful. Gratitude is such a powerful thing. Should be a part of everyone's self-talk, in my opinion. Appreciate and celebrate your unique self. The subconscious mind is very powerful. It works to bring into reality your thoughts. The subconscious doesn't know reality from fantasy. It doesn't make those distinctions. The conscious mind does. Whatever you program in, or whatever has been programmed into your subconscious mind, regardless of whether it's true, will be manifested. What you see or believe about yourself tends to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Listen to what you're saying, thinking, believing about yourself. Do your words, pictures, expectations paint the picture that you really want for you? And if they don't, then be willing to work on changing them. Rephrase to paint your ideal self. And then you're on your way to becoming that person. All right. I am. These are just some examples of affirmations or thoughts to think. I am becoming the person I want to be. And when you're becoming the person you want to be, you're not doing it for you. You're doing it to serve your higher self, the Father, the people around you that you love and care about, all the different realms you exist in. But if you don't develop you, then you're not in a position. And whether you go through a profession, if you don't develop self, you have less to give to the world. If when you're developing self, you're recognizing why you're doing it, it changes enormously how you feel about the process. And life is a process. I am my own best friend and cheerleader. Thank you, Almighty God. Thank you for the qualities and talents that make me unique. I give myself permission to create new paradigms, new ways of seeing, thinking about, and believing who I am, so that I can go further than I think right now may be possible. Okay. In closing, one of the things that and I've written this down actually, I was doing some prayer this morning, and it's kind of interesting. I wrote down jailer, liberator. Our self-talk, as I've defined it, either keeps it, we either are a jailer of who we are and who we could become by our self-talk, or we become our liberator of our life circumstances. And all that makes the difference is our self-talk, the choices we're making, the actions we're taking. If you will, our self-talk encompasses all that we are. Thank you.